Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on bespoke housing design. I'm Jan Kucharek, and I'm editor of Products in Practice. And this is going to be the last PiP seminar of the year on a particularly grim day. I've got a window in front of me, and it's really, I think I'd rather be staring at the screen, to be honest. Reality looks a bit unbearable. I think it bears kind of mentioning again, which I always find it funny, but I did speak to a young and successful entrepreneur developer a few years back who told me that he always had a problem with employing architects because whenever he went to their houses, they always seemed to be in a state of half completion, and it left him wondering if he'd ever get his project finished. It minded me of a Spanish proverb that goes, "In the house of the blacksmith, they eat with wooden knives." Because for a while, the way this developer saw the half-finished state of their homes as a source of concern, I see it as nothing but as a source of perpetual inspiration. Because for architects, their own home is generally a site of investigation, a territory where they're their own clients. And instead of ideas being watered down, their philosophies could instead be enacted in a pure and distilled manner. Yet with such responsibility, is it any wonder that any self-respecting architect's home would be seen as anything other than a work in progress? Of course, it is lovely to see the ideas worked through. I may never experience now Konstantin Melnikov's 1929 Moscow house, but I always enjoyed Richard Rogers' Chelsea home, his 1983 high-tech pop fantasy, hidden behind a Victorian facade. But for all of these consummated ideas, there's something undeniably beautiful about the interrogative nature of, say, the late great Florian Bagel's London flat, whose modest rooms, I recall, were the site of some amazing experimental material and spatial interventions. Private houses invariably do well on our website. It seems that checking out how other people live makes for very good clickbait. Architects must enjoy seeing ideas taken to high levels of resolution, funded by the kind of bottom lines that most in the profession could only dream of. Quatrefoil House in Oxford by Hyde and Hyde, which appeared in the latest PiP, was as high spec as the motoring executive's client's Aston Martin parked outside it. And being the lovely homes of no doubt demanding clients, the projects we'll be seeing today will be works of rigorous design and thorough execution. No half-built stairs here, but plenty to summon our own green-eyed monsters from the caves we usually hold them in. But if we need to feel better about ourselves, we'll at least be including a very worthy deep retrofit project, which, if we need reminding, draws our focus back to our place on the planet rather than our place in a home. But to start, we'll be taking a look at self-build, a wonderful expression of individual and community self-empowerment. And to do that, we'll be speaking to Julian Owen, Managing Director and founder of Julian Owen Associates Architects. Julian is a Nottingham architect and founder of and Managing Director of this East Midland practice. He's Director of ASBA Architects, a national network he formed in 1992, and has been a representative on the National Council of the RIBA, Chairman of the Nottingham and Derby Society branch of it, and Chair of RIBAJ East Midland region. He also chaired the East Midlands Construction Industry Council for 5 years, which he helped to set up in 2003. As well as writing magazine articles, he's written and published books for consumers on house design, home alterations, and timber frame constructions, receiving an MBE for services to architecture in the process. And today he's going to be speaking to us about his new book, Self-Build, How to Design and Build Your Own Home. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes.
I hope the weather's better where you are than where it is here in London.
It is not. No, it's pouring with rain here in Nottingham, I'm afraid. So I'm glad I'm indoors.
So you're about to speak to us about self-build.
Well, self-build and custom build, because the two are inextricably linked nowadays, which is one of the things I want to explain.
So you have the floor, please go ahead.
Okay, tell me if this doesn't work. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, right. Well, you've already very kindly done a bit of an introduction there. The one bit I'd like to add is that I'm also a member of the Right to Build Task Force, and that's a government set up body which has the specific duty to encourage local authorities to do more in terms of helping self-builders and so see more custom build. So what I'm going to talk about mainly today is how the planning system is being fine-tuned, adjusted, so that it makes it more possible for people to build their own homes. And I'm also going to talk about how more opportunities are going to be created for architects, particularly in terms of work. I do feel a bit like the Support Act today, because you've got some wonderful projects that you're going to be seeing shortly, but so you just have to bear with me. I'll do my best for everybody. So if you only remember one thing that I say today, please let it be, this is not, we're not just talking about grand designs here. There are some marvelous projects, as you're going to see. Kevin MacLeod is great. It's good to see all those interesting buildings. But what we're trying to do here is a culture change. So we're trying to change the possibilities for people who maybe people who wouldn't actually consider themselves something like this because they think it'll all be too expensive. So what we want to do is change it so that there's it's far more opportunities for people on lower incomes. The government recognised a while ago that there are some serious problems with delivery in the housing market, and they did a number of things which I'll describe fairly shortly to try and put that right. Was it two prime ministers ago? There was clear support. There is cross-party support for custom and self-build, encouraging it and making it happen in all over the country and more frequently. So definitions, here's an interesting one because people have been trying to pin down exactly what we're talking about. And the government definition is that you have to have primary input into the final design and layout of the building. So that's the key, and it can be either self-build at one end of the spectrum or custom build at the other, where it's enabled by a developer. But that's the key, primary input. Self-build, I'm not going to take too long on this because I'm guessing that most of you will know what self-build involves in terms of one-off houses. So there's freedom to build. Usually it's a single plot. Sometimes there might be more than one plot. People do the organising themselves. So you have that classic self-builder won't necessarily actually do the building work, but they will organise it and take full responsibility for it happening. And typically, there are separate contracts with the architect and the contractor appointed separately, sometimes design build. Custom build is where it gets a bit more interesting. First thing with custom build is they are multi-plot sites. So you're not looking at one plot, you're looking at a group of plots, could be quite a lot of plots. So again, I'll show a bit later on. So there has to be what you might call an enabler, a specialist developer, someone who acts as a kind of intermediary, a guide, and sets up the logistics for people to do their project. So there are a variety of different ways of doing this, but effectively what happens is that plots are provided, opportunities for people to create their own homes are provided, and there are various controls that are put in place technically to make sure that happens and that we keep the planners happy. Don't we just have to keep the planners happy? So the purchasers, the people who buy the end result, will have control over the project. How much control they have is where it gets quite interesting, because there's a range of different possibilities for people. Again, whereabouts these projects happen, again, you'll be very familiar with small plots, family. I mean, I'm sure all the architects will have done at least one. I've done a lot of one-off houses for families. But there are opportunities now for them in larger housing developments. Terrace properties, everyone will say, well, how can you do that? It's perfectly possible. And they've done it abroad in Holland and places like that. And even apartments can qualify as custom and self-build. And ultimately, regeneration opportunities too. So this is a bit of a shame, this slide, which Britain is behind really in this. We have a very low number of plots that are actually developed for people. And as you can see, other countries have a different attitude. There's far more diversity in the market. So at the moment, well, it's arguable exactly how many are done, because statistics being statistics, people are not quite sure how you add it all up. But 13,000, 10 to 15,000, something in that order. Most people would prefer not to buy a new house, which is why they're doing it, which I think is quite sad. But new houses are not popular in this country in the volume estates, which is a shame. I won't bore you with too many statistics. This one is more interesting to me. The number of small and medium-sized builders has absolutely plummeted in the last 20 years who are involved in house building. I'm sure, again, my architect colleagues will know it's so difficult to get good builders who will do these kind of projects. And they've just been squeezed out of the market, which is a shame, again, because those are the kind of people that we want to cherish. So at the moment, there's about 30 custom build firms who do this enabling job. I'm quite sure that's going to grow. A lot of people are coming across, or companies are coming across from Europe, where this is done a lot. They have all the experience and knowledge of how to do it. So there are opportunities for them. And there are one or two homegrown as well. Here, it's all about choice. It's all about diversifying the market, making buildings more interesting. And I'm talking about ordinary people's houses, not just you know, the multimillionaires who are doing kind of keynote architectural designs for their homes. Right. So why should we encourage it? I mean, why bother? It's true that most countries, if you can afford to buy a detached house or even a terrace house in some places, you can afford and you can do your own custom or self-build. That's in other countries. So either they've all got it wrong or we have. Obviously, I think the latter. Again, we've said most people, sadly, are not keen on new houses because the quality of design, etc., and unfortunately, quality of the building in some cases. The other interesting thing is, and anyone who's worked with them, with self-builders will know, they absolutely love new ideas and they are open to ideas. UK construction industry is a bit stodgy. They tend to be conservative a lot at this level anyway, and stick with what they know. Self-builders don't have any of that. They have a fresh view and they will go for something if they think it's interesting or it's right. And they don't have no history to think, oh, well, I've always done it that way, so let's carry on doing it. The other thing is, which is very important, is that they tend to be sustainable. I've been doing this for about 30 years. In the 1990s, it was almost routine to have heat pumps with my clients. It's kind of the latest thing now, isn't it? But actually, these people who are building their own homes have been open to that for years because they're going to live in it and they're going to have to pay the bills. There are broader benefits, increased training, because you have a lot of local people have opportunities for work. Mostly, almost universally, better quality construction because of the concentration on one building, making sure it's right. In some of the buildings you're going to see a bit later, the attention and thought that's gone in does not happen on bigger sites where there are a large number of standard houses being built. And the design is better. There's more diversity and potential for more diversity, certainly, which again is something we are trying to work with at the Right to Build task force. And it's also more responsive. So instead of a big developer coming from outside, communities will get the opportunity to do their own thing. And it makes new housing estates much more attractive and more employment for the trades and the builders. And also it has the potential, again, to shake the market up, because we've talked about that issue of the housing market is broken. That's what the government said. It's a way of kind of disrupting a bit, if that's not too Liz Trussian. So it's a way of changing things by setting good examples. I'm not going to go into the detail of the various benefits that are available, but it's good for communities. They can be in touch with the building and the creation of homes in their locality. It's very good for councils because it gives them an opportunity to control quality. There's all sorts of benefits for local authorities. And the builders and landowners, certainly smaller builders, certainly the ones that are prepared to think outside the box. And there are some of the bigger house builders who are now actively looking at custom build opportunities because there's some real potential in it for them. And also it can help with the cash flow because you can sell off the plots early when you're doing a site, if some of them are self-built. So it's not just for the wealthy. They're people who, self-builders, they're people who are dissatisfied with what's happening at the moment, and they want something better. For some, it's a chance to get up on the housing ladder, because if you do a self-build, you can usually make money on it, even if you use a professional team, certainly if you do some DIY and do some of the work yourself. A third of the people who were surveyed recently by NAXPA, that's the organization that represents self and custom builds companies and architects, a third of them said they were interested in doing a self-build. And even more interesting to me, half of the younger people were very keen. So I've said we're only getting to 10 to 15,000. It should be at least 30 to 40,000 if even if you went partway to satisfying the actual demand. If we were anything like Germany in terms of proportion, we'd be doing 120,000 custom and self-builds a year. And just quickly to show this graph, this is the wrong way around. Again, those architects like me who do one-off houses, we're normally on the right-hand side, our clients are. Actually, the biggest demand is on the left-hand side from younger people. So we've got it exactly the wrong way around. Far more being built for people who are older than younger. I won't go into this too much, but again, you can see there from that graph, look along the bottom, timber frame, all sorts of interesting ICFs, insulated concrete formwork. It's all stuff which they use and you build real buildings out of. Okay, so in terms of what these people need, these families, to make them do it or help them to do it, they need the risk managing, because it's seen as risky by building societies and banks as much as individuals. The television programs are great, but they do go for drama, don't they? Which actually is not what you want. If I'm running a building project on site, I don't want drama. And the ones that go well are rather boring from a television point of view. They need a lot of support. They need reassurance. They're new to construction industry usually. They need a lot of explaining and helping. They need a clear idea of cost, which is very important, especially now, gosh. They need a clear idea of what will get permission, especially if they're buying a site and it hasn't got their house on it permitted yet. They need the red tape cutting, which is very important. They need some protection as consumers, because they're developers, but they're not really developers. And they also need a central point of information and advice and assistance. And I hope you guess what the next bit will be. Architects. We are really well placed to provide this. And just to show how it works, over half the people who self-build at the moment use architects or designers. And then there are package companies and others that get involved. But there's a real opportunity for architects here. So the types of self-build that are being made available, there's individual ones which are fixed by people on their own account. There's community land trusts. There are collective co-housing projects which have been done. There are serviced self-builds that are provided by bigger companies. On very large sites, there are also plots being made available. And there are custom builder enabled homes, companies that are set up to do things. There are self-finished homes, which are where the shell is provided. And then there are starter homes, which have a bigger input. There are affordable homes where there's deals done by what's called sweat equity. So the government is very committed to this. It's nothing to do with which shade of colour. So the left and the right and the middle are all very keen on this, because I think they can see that it helps communities, but also it's a kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So it seems to go down very well with the politicians. So just briefly, there are statutory duties on the planners. Now they have to keep a register. That register has to be given regard. That's a register, I ought to say, if anyone who wants to build in their area, it should be, wants to build their own home, they have to pay regard to that and try and adjust policy according to the demand that's suggested by the register. A lot of people don't know about this. Check with your own local authority. Try and get on it. I've tried with mine, and I'm registered on my local authority if it's interested. One small fly in the ointment is that local planning authorities are not doing what they're supposed to. Actual legislation has been passed to say that they should be doing this, and a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them think that they are satisfying this demand that they've identified simply by giving permission for one-off plots. It's not about that. The plot has to be exclusively for self-build, which means conditions have to be applied. And those can be done by saying, 10% of a large housing development have to be custom and self-build. Policies which talk about housing mix, rural exception sites, in other words, building in the greenbelt, housing strategy, commitments, again, technical stuff which the planners need to have recorded and decided. Some local authorities have got action plans, some are running pilot projects, and there are some joint ventures with Homes England particularly, and that's, well, we're hoping in the future, and council has land and disposes of it. So if you want to get something more information on this, one thing to look at is a document produced by Richard Bacon, the MP, and he's made a number of recommendations about how we can make sure that there's more self-build and custom build. And I love that, iron out the tax increases. What he's talking about there, tax creases, he means it's really bureaucratic tax-wise, which is true. That's a politician's way of describing it. So far, we have the Help to Build scheme, government loans, which are designed to help people who have less money and maybe can't afford a deposit on the land. They will fund that now. There's now a scheme in place. There are planning reforms in process, and we, Right to Build Task Force, for example, are educating local authorities on how to implement them. And Homes for England have recently created a self-commissioned homes unit, which is their way of saying custom self-build, or perhaps even bespoke house design. There are issues with descriptions, but anyway, that's what they're there to do, makes more self-builds happen. If you want some examples, I would recommend Bicester in Oxfordshire, where there are hundreds of homes which have been made available for custom and self-build. It's really worth a visit if you're an architect. It's like being in a foreign country. There are so many different designs and schemes, some good, some bad. And again, just quickly some examples. There's plots created by a developer. There's some affordable plots in Lewisham. You might have heard of Marmalade Lane in Cambridge, which is a fantastic design. A really top architect has done that. And also there's an example in York. I could tell you a lot of examples in local authorities, but we don't have time. So the only way this works is if local authority take the lead. Government are there, the demand is there, the local authorities have to pull their finger out and get going with it. So that's very important. All countries where it's successful, the local authorities take the lead. Simplified planning zones are also very useful because they help this process of encouraging people to buy before they've had, they mainly have outline on the site. And the local authorities can do the land assembly, which is what's happened in Bicester at Graven Hill. And there are plenty of examples you can find of local authorities doing it everywhere. Most of all, for the local authority point of view, it allows them to have more control over provision and quality rather than doing a bulk deal with a developer, but it obviously also creates more work for them. So if any of this is of any interest and you want to follow it up, those are some contact details. I believe that this information is going to be made available to everybody with these links. NAXPA is well worth looking at. They've done a market report, which tells you all about how it's all working at the moment and how it should work. And Richard Bacon's report, I think he's got PDF versions of that. And you might even get a hard copy because he tells me he's got a lot. And obviously, I'm plugging the book, aren't I? So I have to mention Self-Build, which is designed to show people the whole process and also show people what excellent work architects do when they do a self-build project for people. And that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. That was a quick kind of run through of all the main points there. That was a real whistle stop. It's really interesting because you kind of seem to suggest that in fact there's this kind of great public will. I mean, I think that stat that you produced where you said 2/3 of people actually don't want to live in a volume house builder, which you kind of think goes against the grain when you see how many kind of noddy homes there are out there. But it just made me think, what do you think are really the true impediments to all of this? I mean, it's interesting that there seems to be an awful lot of kind of legislation in the pipeline really that's kind of promoting this. And, as you say, gov.uk's got a self-build, part of the website, but there seems to be, I mean, do you think it's just the fact that I mean, I know that local councils seem to be suffering. There's been cuts in funding to planning. Do you think that the bottlenecks kind of occurring in planning? Do you think, because it's not like there doesn't seem to be a will, at least on paper, but why are we, the worst country in Europe to kind of like go forward with self and custom build?
I think a lot of it is cultural, because it's how we've always done it. And some people, especially not in the construction industry, are quite surprised when they hear about how houses are procured in Western Europe and other countries. And it seems very strange and exotic. So there's a cultural block. The main delays or problems that put people off, one is planning, definitely. And a lot of the work the good planning departments are doing are to do with things called plot passports and design codes, which set up a matrix of what could be built. Graven Hill has done this very successfully. So it allows for plenty of freedom for the individual, but it also gives some rules about broadly how plots can be developed. The other one is finance. That's identified again by Richard Bacon's report. And one of the solution that the government have got in place, which is gradually gaining momentum, is Help to Build, which is where the government steps in and they will actually put the money in right at the start of the process for a self-builder, which makes the building societies and the banks they see it as a bit of a risky thing, perhaps erroneously, but because the government carry a big section of that risk by putting money in, which they later recover further on in the process, it gives the building societies confidence to go ahead and lend. So planning, if you ask, finding a site, planning and finance, those are the main blocks. And there are solutions being worked on, and some local authorities have been very successful, for example.
So when do you think we'll see something like Help to Build being implemented? Because I mean, that strikes me as being the main point, is actually if the government is prepared to kind of underwrite it to some extent, then it takes that kind of element of risk out that actually means people are prepared to lend.
Yes.
End up with really is kind of, or certainly the ones that I had experience of or knew about, was that there was, it tended to be very expensive bridging loans that kind of allowed people to kind of like start the work in order to kind of like turn it into a mortgage at some point further down the line. But actually that's a hugely expensive way to finance it.
It is, and it's been one of the reasons that the houses that have, certainly ones that get most attention, have been quite grand. Help to Build, the government loan scheme, has been in place since the summer. As with all these things, there's a slow take up that's gradually accelerating. A lot of people haven't heard about it. And again, architects, familiarize yourselves, because this is something that will help you get work. If you've got a client or potential client, we've sort of seen a site we like, we're not sure about the finance, put them in touch with Help to Build, because they will then enable that project. And obviously that's then work for architects.
We have a question here that says, from Ruth Reed, do you know of examples where LPA's custom self-build plot provision has been challenged at appeal?
Hi, Ruth. Yes, there have been cases and there's been mixed results. I could go into the detail, but there's been some cases in Leicestershire, for example, where permission has been gained for houses, or a house in that one case I'm thinking of, which otherwise would not have been approved if it hadn't been for the fact that the local council had failed in their duty to provide self-build plots in accordance with the demand that they'd assessed from their register. So yeah, it's a mixed bag with the local authorities, but there have been a lot of successful appeals quite recently. Ruth, if you want to contact me separately, I could give you some more indications of that. But also, if you look on the Right to Build Task Force or the NAXPA site, you'll probably find some references to it there as well.
I mean, I think that, you kind of think with councils so cash-strapped as they are, that it would make it almost, because it does sound to be quite a bespoke process. And I suppose you talking about the idea that you absolutely need an architect on board to kind of help this, because ultimately the architect is acting as a facilitator, not just a designer, but as you say, if you're connecting people with Help to Build, you're kind of giving them ways in which they can resource these projects. So it's actually a really key facilitation role. But then you also then think, are councils really in a position to, because it sounds to me, it does sound quite bespoke, and it does sound something like that it needs coordination and organisation from both parties, really, not just the designers, but also the people who are helping, you know, the planning organisations helping facilitate the process.
There are planning departments who are doing this very successfully. I showed Graven Hill in Bicester because that's been the most successful one. There's one down in Kent, a custom build site. Local authorities like Stoke, Cambridge, Glasgow, York, they have all actually enabled projects in different ways using different mechanisms. True, councils of Stratford House planners are overworked, but still some local authorities are managing it. And we really are talking about a paradigm shift here, a change in culture, and that's not going to happen overnight. But more and more local authorities are showing an interest, and more of them are also turning it into something. And so that's the work of the Right to Build Task Force. I've only recently joined, but they've done some fantastic work helping local authorities achieve this. Basically, though, it needs backing from the elected members. That's what the key seems to be, and an enthusiast within the planning department to take on the role and promote it.
Oh, well, maybe actually finding out really how Bicester does it, because it sounds like it's a very successful model. So I just wonder whether there's kind of reports published that talk about their methodologies, really, so that it can spread the. It sounds like it's worked successfully there.
It has. They have a website. If you Google Graven Hill in Bicester, you'll find there's a lot of information there. There are tours that are done. A limited number. You can just turn up in your car, as I've done more than once, and wander around, take a few photographs. But it's well worth a visit if you're anywhere near there, or you have the opportunity to have a look. It's fascinating.
There's a question from Robin Miller saying, given the popularity of ICF methods in the self-build sector, why do you think the broader industry is so reluctant to adopt MMC?
Well, I suppose it depends which bit of the industry. I think the sort of high end, the volume house builders and people like that, they make their decisions based on economy, what's most profitable, I suppose. The mid-range and the lower sized builders, I love them, but they are quite old-fashioned, a lot of them, in the way they look at things. Some of them consider timber frame. I'm not going to mention any names. In Nottinghamshire, they consider timber frame dangerously radical. So there's an education problem there, if you like, but some of my clients who've used ICFs and other stuff like that have ended up, the builders at the end of it thought, oh, this is great, and then they've tried to do more of them because they've discovered how easy they are to work with, provided you know what you're doing. You have to do your research and learn some new tricks.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Julian. I've been instructed here that you need to log into the chat to find it, because there's questions there. We do need to move on, but I think your talk has kind of solicited an awful lot of interest there. For our viewers, Julian Owen's book, Self-Build: How to Design and Build Your Own Home, is available through RIBAJ Books. And if you put in the PiP 10 code, I think you get a £10 discount there. So that will all make it very worthwhile, I'm sure. Thank you very much indeed, Julian.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And we are moving on now to our first sponsor presentation. The presentation is called Ceramics in Architecture, and it's given by Clara Vicedo Peñarrubia, an architect at the ASCER-Tile of Spain. Sorry there, don't want that. Clara did her architecture BA at the Polytechnic University of Valencia, then moved on to the University of Eindhoven. Prior to joining ASCER, the Spanish Ceramic Tile Manufacturers Association, she worked for 5 years at several international architectural practices. Clara focuses on promoting Tile of Spain brand among architects and designers, strengthening connections between Spanish ceramics in design, health and sustainability. She has a master's degree in marketing and communications strategy and continues to freelance as a consultant architect. How on earth do you get all that done, Clara?
Sorry?
I said you're keeping yourself very busy as a consultant architect and working.
Yeah, well, a lot of work.
Yeah.
And not too much free time.
Anyway, you have the floor. You're telling us about ceramics in architecture.
Yeah, I will share my computer. My screen. Okay. You see it okay? Yes. Okay. Well, Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Riva, for giving us the opportunity to take part in this webinar and present the advantages of using Spanish ceramic tiles to architects in the UK. Well, Tile of Spain is the umbrella brand of the Spanish ceramic tile industry, under which the Spanish Ceramic Tile Manufacturer Association, ASCER, together with ISEX, promote the use of Spanish ceramic tiles among architects and designers. In this slide, I'm presenting some general data about the sector, which shows Spain as a strong global leader in the industry. In 2021, we had a total sales value of 5,000 million euro with an average price of €8 per square meter. Our exports represent more than 75% of our sales, and in 2021, they reached more than 3,500 million euro. Well, the Spanish ceramic tile sector boasts a long tradition linked to an innovative industry and cutting-edge design. We are determined to adapt our production processes to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. To this end, we have been making technological and innovative improvements to our production processes. And these are the result of high investment on research, development, and innovation. These are focused on 4 different areas: new production processes and new uses and products, both based on energy efficiency and sustainable production and green construction. I must emphasize that the total CO2 emissions of the Spanish ceramic tile industry per ton of pipe product have been cut by 60% since 1980s. The Spanish ceramic tile industry has also pioneered the development of a sectorial APD for Spanish tile production, which provides quantified, objective, and verified information of the environmental impacts of a product throughout its life cycle assessment. Besides, most of our member companies have a Type 3 APD verified by a third party. Well, the building and construction sector is responsible for more than 35% of carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions in Europe. Consequently, new construction and renovation projects will have to prioritize environmental criteria. When choosing Spanish ceramic tiles, we are choosing a durable material which has a long lifespan estimated at 50 years, which means that ceramic tiles are the best option regarding sustainable construction. We have commissioned a study by the independent consultancy Eco-Intelligence Growth, which compares different flooring materials. The circular passport of the different materials covered by this study were compared to check the local impact, the total impact, of 1 square meter of ceramic tile, carpet, wood, and vinyl. And in this slide, you have an overview of the results. Well, currently, the Spanish companies offer a wide range of products for interior, exterior, urban spaces, floor, walls, countertops. Well, the choices are endless. Reflecting society's increased awareness and sensitivity to living in healthier and more sustainable spaces, there is a growing demand for buildings with green building certifications. Spanish ceramic tiles can contribute to meet the requirements of certification schemes, such as BREEAM, LEED, WELL, and Passive House, by scoring in different areas, such as EPD, low-emitting materials, and indoor air quality, among others. And well, let's see some examples of these one-off houses with Spanish ceramics. The AA house was built in 2009 by Carlos Ferrater from OAP Studio in Barcelona. For his own house, Carlos selected ceramic panels with a height of 3 meters. The whole house was covered with these white slabs, including the roof. The extreme angles were not an obstacle for Tile of Spain, as the panels can be water jet cut in any shape. porcelain tile was also used on the floor of the house, but this time the product chosen were in dark gray panels. This incredible design served as an inspiration for so many layering of houses, like this Ametller house in Barcelona, where the large format porcelain tiles are used for the ventilated facade in two constructing colors. Spanish tiles were also chosen for the outside space and the garden, but in this case, double thick tiles were used. Well, the selection of Tile of Spain products for outdoor use is not by chance. In this project by La Mirateca, 3 tile patios provide a solution for the functionality of the whole building. Also, the slope of the access is completely covered by the same porcelain tile used in the garden pavement. Here, thanks to the use of large glass walls, there is no difference between the inside and outside, just because the different porcelain tiles on the floor. Well, and another case study linked to the idea of minimalism is the TJ House by Summon Studio, who used only one series of porcelain tile for the whole project, including facade, key volumes, walls, and floors. They were driven by the idea of just keeping the essential, and the result was amazing. In contrast to the project before La Mirateca, Summon designed a seamless transition between indoors and outdoors by using the same gray ceramic flooring everywhere. Well, and Tile of Spain is often used in one of renovation projects. For instance, this intervention includes the use of lightweight, large format marble effect ceramic panels that transform a seemingly simple highway into a focal point that illuminates the entire home. And yeah, refurbishment has been the key type of intervention in the last few years, as many buildings were built decades ago, and it is time to reconsider their value and make them more energy efficient. One remarkable example is this house in Alicante, where the end result is a complete transformation of the previous building. Porcelain and wooden surfaces live together brilliantly in this house, mixing an industrial and minimalistic aesthetics with a more cozy and warm design. Well, I would like to explore how also Spanish ceramics can offer this type of atmospheres too. Well, we cannot deny that ceramic and wood work beautifully together. In this one-off house renovation, in contrast to the previous project, we have a more traditional design where red porcelain tiles live together with wooden wall and doors, which are transformed into green ceramic mosaic walls in the humid rooms. A single type of floor is used across the whole house, creating a Mediterranean look along the house. And when talking about new traditional flooring, we have to mention this house renovation by Paramount Taul. A continuous flooring, the same for the whole house, combines the color white with small clay tiles to create a greater sense of spaciousness. The architects skillfully combine modernity and tradition, reflecting the essence of the local architecture by using authentic traditional materials like these porcelain Tile of Spain tiles. And in this project, we can see a dialogue between modernity and tradition by means of a combination of red ceramic tiles, but this time on the walls, in contrast to the gray continuous floor. Special mention for this project of the young studio Arquitectura G in English, who cover all the horizontal surfaces with a simple red ceramic tile, combining shiny and matte finishes, creating a calm and special mood in this country house in Girona. And following with this choice of traditional ceramic tile for a country house, we find this other project by Rivera Architects, who chose a red stoneware tile for the floor of the whole construction and selected a very special square faded green tile for the vertical surfaces, resulting in a very attractive mix of smart and traditional design. We can also find this type of small square tiles in city dwellings. The same format was used in these apartments by Camprodome Studio. Here we can see the new trend of mixing bathroom and bedroom in one visual room using the same stoneware tile covering the floor and half of the wall in different rooms. Undoubtedly, the color green wins the game in 2022. In this project, an extruded ceramic piece glazed in green covers the main volume of the project, which contains the stairs of this country house in Mallorca. The combination of the 4 tiles shown in this image, the first one, is also a good example of the dialogue between modernity and tradition shown in this presentation with Tile of Spain. However, not everything is green. This risky design is projected for a new house where the architects are using colorful stoneware tiles in the interior and exterior in the facade. By the way, this project reminds me of the Space Invaders video game. Maybe it's the holiday home of the creator. I'm not sure. When showing colorful and crazy projects, I have to mention Casa Bicho, a back house in English. A one-off house full of colorful ceramic tile surfaces in contrast with the serious and rough concrete. A magnificent study of opposites resulting from the determination of the architects of not following any preconception. And well, I can't miss this opportunity to announce that the winners of the Tile of Spain Awards will be next week. It is an honor for us to have Eric Parry as chair of the jury this year. I encourage all the public to take part and present your projects with Tile of Spain in the next edition next year. I would also like to announce that the next publication of a book will include some of the best projects using Hispanic ceramic and whose objective is to inspire architects and designers. The title is Ceramic, the Outer Skin of Architecture. I will be glad to send you a link to the digital copy when it's ready. Just contact me by email. To finish with this, with the presentation, I would like to finish with this quote by Sir Norman Foster. As an architect, you design for the present with an awareness of the past for a future, which is essentially unknown. And well, the future in construction and architecture is related to a healthy lifestyle and obviously sustainability. Sustainability, economic, environmental, and social. And in this context, Spanish ceramic tiles are endued to being a sustainable material, offering benefits in terms of well-being and functionality, and offering the design and use that best fits any project. Well, thank you very much. Here you have my email. If you want to just contact me, I will share the ceramic publication with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Clara. It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's great looking at those projects because it's just a kind of a blaze of color. It kind of, reminds me of this kind of big return to kind of postmodern interiors where there's just, patination and everything. And it was really nice to see. So actually, even in one of the last houses there, where you had 4 different tile types, kind of 3 different tiles on the floor and the green tiles on the wall. I mean, there are obviously architects in Spain pushing it to quite kind of outrageous extremes in a way, almost shocking. I do find it interesting that all the examples you show me you know, what makes them so wonderful is as you referred to frequently, it's the idea of the Mediterranean climate and how suitable ceramics works for that. I'm interested in how easy you find it to kind of break into the UK market, because obviously we're probably very happy to see ceramics all over our bathrooms, but as soon as you start moving into public rooms, kitchen spaces, whatever, you're probably competing, if architects are designing it, with stone, poured concrete, kind of screed floors, or timber. So how do you kind of break into that kind of, how do you bring tiles out of, British bathrooms and into the rest of the house?
Well, Spanish ceramic tile has a versatility in finishings. I mean, you can choose any surface and it will be able to be on the tile. For instance, if you want a good appearance or marble effect, it can be done in the tiles. You don't have to choose a red ceramic tiles or porcelain tiles, which look like more Mediterranean style. I wanted to show you these projects because they made that like a contrast between the first examples and the last one, that the first one were more minimalistic and more industrial look, and the last one were more Mediterranean look, as you said. Well, in the UK, you are more into carpet, let's say, because of I don't know, your tradition, but
yeah, well, exactly, it's kind of
well, but you have to keep in mind that, well, I don't have nothing against carpet, but well, it's not very sustainable, as you know, and it's not a good option for the heating floors. But in contrast, ceramic tiles, because of the density of the material, is one of the best options for the heating floors, which at the same time is the best kind of heating the house, because the heating goes from down to the upper part of the house. So, well, the combination is a win-win.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's also the point, you might have kind of timers on your side in that regard, because I think by 2030, they're trying to get rid of actually selling gas boilers, for instance. So if we're all turning to air source heat pumps and therefore looking at the viability of kind of running underfloor heating throughout our buildings, that might well be playing into your hands, really, in that regard.
Yeah, and well,
oh, sorry.
And I would like also to emphasize the idea of this certification, architectural certification, that, well, like BREEAM or WELL or LEED, I'm not sure which is the most used certification in the UK. If I'm not wrong, is BREEAM, but I'm not sure. And well, because of the characteristics and properties of ceramic tiles, of Spanish ceramic tiles, when designing any house, any project, you get a very high score when choosing a floor by ceramics, made out of ceramics.
Well, I mean, I think, as we said, I think with climate change going on, I think you're probably going to see architects moving more to the idea of using ceramics. And as you said before, it was timber and carpet. With the summers that we've been having recently, certainly this year, I think you might well see that if that's going to be our future, I imagine that you'll be seeing far more kind of ceramic specification in kind of domestic homes, as opposed to house or offices or whatever, or office lobbies, etc.
Well, I have also to say that UK is one of our main markets. We export. I'm not sure about the number, but it's our core market in exports. So
yeah. Oh no.
So I think you are already changing.
Yeah, we're already changing our mindsets.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Thank you very much indeed, Clara. That was a great presentation. Really enjoyed the colours, and kind of took me back to kind of Spanish summers, which is just always nice, especially on a day like this. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've all got your teas. I think in that 5-minute period, we've managed to find, the gremlins have gone and we've managed to find Bob again. So we've got Bob Prewett back, and hopefully he's going to be giving us a phoned-in conversation, which is being kind of prompted by somebody else going through the slides. So that's a piece of kind of modern technology I've yet to experience. So I look forward to this one. Bob, are you there?
I am, Carlos, yes.
Hello. Oh, nice to hear you. Sorry, we lost you briefly.
Thank you for bearing with me. That's the first time that sort of happened to me, so it's kind of a bit scary.
Oh, well, I love a PiP first.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead and good luck with it. I can see your slides, which is nice.
Yeah, so the slides are up. Should be the first slide showing this Mews in West London. Thanks again to you, Carlos and Amber, RIBA Journal, and everyone for joining.
Pleasure.
It's great to see so many people from such a wide distribution across the globe today. It's great. So this project in West London is called Mews House Deep Retrofit, which is not a very catchy title, but it does describe what I'm going to talk about. So, Stuart, if you can advance one slide, there's a few words coming up. So the key things I'm going to talk about in the next 15 minutes are, I'm going to talk about the context of the project, what the drivers were, or indeed the constraints. Talk about our approach conceptually. I'm going to focus a little bit on the stair, which is a sort of key design move, and then move on more generally to some of the interiors. And then I'd like to conclude on some measuring that we've done before and after the project. Excuse the typo there. And in case I forget to mention people, I thought I'd credit people at the start. So thanks very much to Hannah Carter-Owers, who helped us with the interiors, to Tom Graham Workshop, who did amazing work on the joinery, both the design and delivery, and to Andrew Meredith and David Grandgeorge, who provided the photographs that are in this deck. So next one, which is page 3, constrained site. So you can see the plan of the Mews there, and in the red sort of outline around that single house in about the middle of the screen. That's our client's site. So it's an end of terrace sort of Mews house. There's no external space in its ownership. So that's quite a fundamental constraint. So no opportunities for extensions or landscaping or changing that relationship very much. The front, which you can see 2 versions of on the left, before and after. Again, very little bandwidth there for change. We modified the roof and the dormer windows, and we've changed the facade treatment. It's a sort of a breathable paint system now, but quite modest changes. Next one. So page 4. So these are the layout drawings of the house as we found it. So an 8x8 plan, quite generous, but the way it'd been replanned 20, 30 years ago was not very successful in our view. So towards the front of the house, the bottom of the page, the spaces are quite well lit. But as you move to the back, there are fewer windows. So there's a general feeling of gloom. The dining space on the ground floor is sort of tucked in a corner in quite a dimly lit space. There's a garage between it and the street, a garage which is too small to park a modern car. So that garage space has become the sort of new entrance way, the only place you could come in and take shoes and hat off, sort of thing. And the front door was rendered a bit useless. And the problems upstairs were similar too. So if you go to the next slide, there's some photographs there showing that dining space, which even with the sort of multitude of recessed downlights is not such a great space. Turning around, looking at the living space, sort of a lack of sort of control of sort of entrance area and a slightly uncomfortable relationship between that sofa and so on. And upstairs on the first floor, sort of long, narrow ensuite bathroom. Again, with no natural daylight and sort of poorly handled sort of materials and levels and so on. So, so our client was very keen to substantially change the interiors and improve them. And that was sort of the first strand of our brief. The next strand of our brief was she'd lived there for 2 years before we came along, or were invited to come along, and the energy use was quite prolific. You can see on the left-hand graph there most of the energy use being down to heating demand. A sizable chunk above that just pure flue gas losses because the heating demand's so big, and the EPC, you know, corresponded with that and classed this as a band F, and it was sort of particularly unambitious in declaring it might get as far as a band E, which I think we proved was rather too light touch. These are some pictures taken during construction, so I'm jumping forward now, but the reason I've shown these, on the brickwork walls, you can see these sort of regular white splodges of material, which are the remnants of dot and dab plasterwork. So dot and dab is, in my view, kind of the hallmark of poor quality building work. It's quite quick and easy. It's quite cheap. It covers up. It makes rooms look quite finished, but leaves a sort of a very air leaky space behind that finish. So it's quite sort of it deludes people into thinking things have done well. And it was only when we sort of uncovered that we realised why the house felt so uncomfortable, as well as being hard to heat before. So our approach then focused around reorganising the vertical circulation, the staircase, and this sketch that we did at feasibility study sort of showed how we felt that should happen. And we pulled that staircase into that corner previously occupied, you might recall, by the dining space on ground. And the idea is this stair, as well as providing a sort of a clearer circulation between in and out on ground, allows space, air and light to sort of flow up the building. That's both a sort of an architectural idea and an environmental one in terms of allowing good ventilation in the summer especially, and always allowing good daylight penetration to that darker rear corner of the house. The next slide, this should be on page 9 now. Got a set of plans arranged across the top which show the original layout, and a corresponding set of plans along the bottom showing the proposed layout. You can see that stair shift in the bottom set of plans, the ground floor plan bottom left. You can also make out a screen around a new sort of entrance lobby that conceals a WC, which didn't exist before, and a place to take your shoes off when you come in and take your hat off and sort of arrange yourself before you enter the house proper. And that leaves a sort of a 3-part plan which divides itself neatly between cooking, eating and living. And then as one goes upstairs, that sort of simplicity of plan allows for bedrooms and so on to unfold quite easily. The other thing to note on the first floor plan is the top of that plan, we've introduced 2 windows which introduce more daylight into the building. Those are done under a sort of a not often used permitted development bit of law that we discovered. So next one, page 10. These are some simple models we made of that ground floor space. You can see the staircase and its relationship to the kitchen, and you can also see the glazed screen and lobby area, and get a sense of, you know, it's a fairly generous plan actually at 8 by 8 meters, so it can accommodate those spaces quite comfortably. You'll see that later on we adjusted the furniture layout later in the design too. Page 11, the next one, this summarizes some of the key retrofit measures. So these are the measures which are focused primarily on energy reduction, especially in regard to heating requirement. So it's working round clockwise from bottom left. So all the walls were stripped and were coated in 2 inches of insulating plaster, which allowed the walls to remain moisture open while reducing their U value substantially and their heat loss substantially. Next one up, all windows were remade as multi-pane Victorian windows, but using a new insulating glass called evacuated glass. That gives the windows especially high performance while looking even up close like single glazing. The higher level windows, next image up, were all fitted with external blinds, so they get quite a lot of solar access, which is great in the winter, but not so great in the summertime. So the ability to drop those blinds in summer really helps reduce overheating risk. Then on the roof, we've got an air source heat pump, which I'll explain sort of how that works in terms of the energy mix later on. But it was quite a useful location for that device. It's sort of out the way, can't really be seen. And that's a really important part of the overall energy reduction. Top right, we've got an MVHR heat recovery ventilation system, which is fitted in a cupboard upstairs and provides silent ventilation, healthy air throughout the building. Next two down, we've got a drying cupboard, which looks like a slightly odd thing. So this is a space where you hang your wet laundry and it dries. So that's hooked up to the ventilation system. It means the tumble dryer doesn't need to be used very much, and laundry dries within a few hours after washing. And the house is completely underfloor heated. So that is enabled by, first of all, insulating it quite well, getting the heat demand down to a point where underfloor heating is possible. And again, that helps the heat pump work a bit more efficiently because we're able to use quite low temperature warm water to heat all those spaces. So back at feasibility again, this was our heating prediction, and we thought we'd get about 70% heating reduction, and I'll come back to that one later on. This is a little study we did looking at page 13 now, looking at insulation comparisons, so looking at different ways of doing it, internal wall insulation, all manner of options available, and we looked at how it impacted on gross internal floor area, fire sort of risks, lambda values, moisture risks, and so on. And surprisingly, page 14, we concluded that actually quite a thin layer of this insulating plaster overall gave us the most advantageous approach. So I'm going to move on to the sort of physical execution now. I'm going to start off with the staircase. This is page 15. So we spent quite a lot of time modeling this in 3 dimensions to try and figure out how the stair should sit as a sort of a monolithic element within this space, sort of a sculptural piece of architecture. And we worked with Tom to create this mock-up quite early on page 16 to figure out how it would be constructed, both at sort of a physical architectural level and also how we make it on the site and how that would fit with the builders program. Page 17 shows that staircase going in. This is the sort of primary structure of it, which is 2 layers of plywood. Those balustrades are acting sort of semi-structurally at this point. You can see the diathanite insulating plaster on the walls next to that before they were covered up with a finishing coat. Page 18 shows things a little bit further advanced. You can start to see the stair sort of form. You can see the wall linings coming down to sort of define the stair area. Page 19 showing the cladding, the oak cladding going on. This went on quite late, so the primary stuff went in early to allow the builder to get up and down the building, and then the cladding came in later, so it didn't get damaged during the construction process. Page 20 then shows the finished article. You get this sense of sort of views between different spaces. And on the right-hand side, you can see some artwork coming in. So the client owned quite a lot of artwork, and this staircase became part of a way of sort of displaying that. Page 21, looking directly down the stair, and a little detail shot of the handrail. So same section of timber, just sculpted slightly differently. Page 22, so back on the ground floor, and you get a sense of the daylight effect, and how the stair brings daylight into the ground floor. Page 23, we're back up on first floor now in this room, which is sort of a first floor semi-private reception, which can also double up as a guest bedroom by putting that curtain across the glass. This is one of my favourite spaces, and I think has become one of the client's favourite spaces too, partly because I think the quality of daylight you get from daylight coming from 3 different directions, from above and from front and back, including that window right in the back there, which we introduced. This is the same room looking the other way. It's quite a simple, small room, but it's the sort of pleasure of good daylighting. Page 25, more overhead light in these 2 spaces, so it's sort of a running theme throughout the project. So it's a deepish plan, really benefits from this overhead lighting. And page 26, you can see it's quite diffuse lighting in the master bedroom. So if we go on to page 27, I'm not generally one for before and after photos, but you get a sense of how the sort of fairly simple spatial rearrangement on ground improved matters somewhat, and quite a reduction in terms of recessed downlight, as you can see also. And the next slide after that, 28, there's that dining space, which is previously quite sort of landlocked and sort of closed, becomes a stair which leads you up into the rest of the house. So those are the key sort of architectural moves. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we learned in terms of measuring. So on the left-hand side of this page 29, we've got energy use before as measured. The middle band is the impact we expected to have on that, or have actually been seen to show, that's resulting from the sort of fabric measures, the insulation, the MBHR, and so on. So an 80% reduction on heating and hot water. It's interesting to note that the red block on the middle one is as big as the peach block on the left-hand side one, which is the gas flue losses originally. So the heating demand now is slightly less than the flue losses were before, which is quite staggering. And on the right-hand side, this shows the impact of the air source heat pump. So it pushes down the energy consumed at the meter by a factor of about 3.5, which is a sort of tremendous result. So it really goes to show that fabric plus good heat pump can deliver very, very strong heating and hot water demand reduction. Page 30 is a summary of what we thought the embodied carbon cost of this project was. Normally the stuff on the right-hand side, the grey stuff, outweighs the stuff on the left-hand side, so the architecture normally dominates. But because there's no extensions here, and most of the structural works are quite light too, actually the architectural kind of carbon, as I call it, is relatively small. And I think this is kind of the way it should be. We should be investing the carbon in the stuff on the left-hand side, which ultimately reduces operational carbon going forward, so insulation, windows, heat pumps, and so on. And then next slide, if we use that previous one and combine it with the operational carbon, we get this sort of plot. So the red lines essentially show what would have happened if we just let the previous building carry on burning lots and lots of gas every year. And over 60 years, you get a very large lifetime carbon cost. The green lines, on the other hand, show what happens, we expect to happen with the building as built. So it's a much flatter line. And the dotted green line represents what happens if electricity becomes net zero by 2040, which we're told it should. So it becomes absolutely flat line at that point. So huge difference over the next 10, 20, 30 years. There's a small sort of payback amount at the start of that process. So already, since we've done the build, project's probably paid most of its embodied carbon back already, and it's starting to move into carbon saving. So finally, before I finish off, so page 32 here, this is a quick screen grab from, I think, the RIBA website. So House of the Year, Channel 4 starts tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Our project is on the long list. I'm not sure if it's on tomorrow's episode or not. I think it might be later, but there's 20 homes which will be shown over the next 4 weeks. So if you're intrigued, do tune in. And finally, page 33, it is a little plug for a campaign called End Gas Now. So our practice has signed up to this, and we commit basically not to take on new projects that propose using gas or fossil fuel heating. So, we're committed to not doing that, because we think by doing so, we can immediately make a tremendous contribution and step forward. And we urge as many of you to join that campaign with us too. Thank you very much. I hope that was all clear, and look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Bob, and thank you very much, Stu, for kind of like trying to manage that process remotely. You're hidden away there somewhere, but thank you for moving those slides along for Bob. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much indeed. We've got really loads of questions about it, so we're probably only going to have to concentrate on a couple. I might give you 2 questions or so in 2 rounds, and then you can maybe answer them quite quickly. The first ones are, we've got 2 people, Robert and Simon Oakley, here saying, please could you explain how your fire strategy works, because surely you're passing the kitchen to discharge people through the escapes.
Okay, so on that, you might have noticed the original plans showed something, it was a similar arrangement beforehand that we inherited, and we developed a strategy using sprinklers and building control. We're happy that we'd improved the situation by doing that. So it doesn't necessarily comply with sort of where you might start with a new build, but that was their sort of accepted approach.
Yes, I was wondering whether you'd incorporated sprinklers, because I was like, how on earth are you doing it? You're going straight past the kitchen. We had also a question from Jacqueline saying, did the 2 inches of insulating plaster meet building regs U values? I'm kind of intrigued by it. What was it, diaphanite?
Yeah, so it's a type of insulating plaster which combines cork with lime and loam, and it gets sprayed on, so it's aerated, and I think that aeration sort of supports its properties. But
is it particularly mucky? Is it difficult to apply then if it's sprayed on? I mean, it sounds like quite a messy job.
Certainly, I think in new hands, it's a bit of a trick. And actually, the installer we used, it was their first time doing it. They had the right equipment, but I was there on day one when they were trying it out, and either the machine was getting bunged up or the stuff was ending on the floor. So day one was a bit of a challenge, but by day 2 they got the mix right and got it sort of flowing nicely, and it went on quite easily after that. So we've used it a few times now.
So then you kind of finish it with kind of like a breathable paint, like a.
Yeah, so there's a thin sort of breathable skim coat that goes over the top, and then we've specifically finished it with a mineral paint, so that maintains a high degree of moisture openness. It's quite important. Yeah.
So so you finished with like a Kime paint. So you've basically allowing the whole wall to breathe from external to internal.
Indeed. So we think, although we've insulated it, we've probably improved the breathability of it because we've removed lots of materials which before weren't, I think, helping the wall. There was quite a lot of sand and cement in places and quite a lot of gypsum alongside the dot and dab stuff. The point about U values is well made though. So the U value, I think we hit was about 0.5 or 0.54, which is higher than building control would normally ask for at 0.3. But we simply argued that we felt that, that was a technically safer, better approach. And you can see that, in the end, although we've not just followed building regs, we've ended up with this sort of tremendous heat loss improvement. And that's partly predicated by sort of being quite focused on things like air tightness as well, and thinking about installation as an overall thing and not just doing kind of the easy bits.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I'm just wondering how it managed to kind of like meet, because I was stupidly, by the by, but I had a heating engineer come and look at my boiler, and I was talking to him about air source, and he was saying, "Oh, I've been going to a load of places, and air source heat, they're not working properly. I don't think, I keep getting called out about them," and so I was just wondering about how, because obviously, they're running at much lower temperatures. So you had to kind of make sure that building was so fully insulated that it would allow it to work. Otherwise, it's a disaster. The house is never going to feel warm enough. So were you happy that diaphanite, kind of gave you enough kind of like fabric insulation there to kind of make sure that the air source heat pump approach worked?
Yeah, so we did quite a lot of modelling in passive house software. And that, gave us quite a lot of confidence that the overall strategy, although perhaps the wall insulation was, not pushing it as hard as some people, think we should.
Yeah.
The overall strategy worked out. So, the air tightness and the heat recovery ventilation saved quite a lot. And the windows, they're pretty tight, and the glass in them is incredibly efficient. Of course, that mansard roof we were able to sort of push much harder on, and the ground floor too, we fitted with insulation. So when looked in the round, yeah, I mean, in fact, I think the air source heat pump was probably slightly oversized. So we had a little bit of headroom there, but the results that we've got from the heat pump show that it and from internal temperatures show that it's pretty much behaving to model, possibly a few percent in the sort of better than planned.
Oh, well done. Going back to your windows, Anna Williamson, just quick question. What PD law did you use for the rear windows?
What was the second point? What something for the rear windows?
Well, she was saying was a permitted development. Yeah. So which PD law did you use for the
Yeah, I can't remember which clause it is, but there is a specific clause for fitting new window openings into, I think, rear walls. And even though that wall was sort of up to the boundary, when we submitted the lawful development certificate, the local authority agreed with us. So apologies for not remembering the clause name. It was several years ago now, but it's in there, and it's quite clearly described within the PD Act. So that was a bit of a surprise to us, actually, when we came across that, and a greater surprise when it sort of went through on the lawful development certificate. And then, I did wonder whether we'd get a legal challenge when the windows were made, but none came. So,
I know, amazing considering it's West London. You would have thought you would have had that sitting on your doormat before very long.
No, indeed. Yeah, and the house behind, I think, sold for about 20 million a couple of years before we did the project. So, clearly a wealthy neighbour, but I think our client did tip them off of what she was doing, and they were perfectly pleasant and lovely about it. So
very nice. How nice to have neighbours like that.
Indeed. No, we had some lovely neighbours, actually. We built the project through COVID, and generally everybody was really supportive. So, a real pleasure.
Very encouraging, and it's a wonderful result. It looks really beautiful. I mean, lots of positive comments. If you look in the chat there, Bob, about how it really does look like a really welcoming, warm, you know, comfortable home to live in.
Super.
Much indeed for presenting it. All the best with the Channel 4 with the House of the Year.
Thanks very much.
And
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Best of luck.
Thanks.
We need to move on quickly to 10:35 now. This should have been a bit earlier. But we are now moving on to our next presentation by Loyne & Company. That's Chris Loyne and James Stroud, who's a director there. Chris established Loyne & Co. in 1992. 30 years later, together with the team, he works on one-off residential commissions, housing, apartments, as well as arts, commercial and ecclesiastical schemes. He's got a strong design philosophy evidenced on projects that build on a consistency of language and techniques developed and tested over time. He's a visiting tutor at a number of architecture schools in Wales, not least at the Centre for Alternative Technologies. And he's also an artist himself and a member of the Royal Watercolour Society of Wales, and he's even exhibited at the RIBA. James, his director, is joined in 2008 after completing his studies at Oxford Brookes, made a director 10 years later, and has been a project designer for some of the practice's most prestigious and demanding projects, including the award-winning Stormy Castle, named as Britain's Best New Home in 2014, and Outhouse, nominated for the Sterling Prize in 2016. James represented the practice on the BBC series Building Dream Homes, appearing alongside the famous Alan Titchmarsh in Love Your Home and Garden, presenting the home aspects of the show. He's a guest critic at the University of Westminster and Oxford Brookes, as well as a tutor at the Welsh School of Architecture. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, morning. I'm
Hello.
Chris.
This is going to be both of you presenting here, so it's a double off. I was saying it's a bit like, you know, Morecambe and Wise, the great double offs.
Want me to do the dance?
We got your glasses.
Quite seriously, we do things in teams here. That's part of our philosophy. It's very
I bet you do. It sounds like a very close-knit team over there.
Yeah, we are. We are indeed. Shall we get on with it?
Please, yes, go ahead. Now,
Okie dokie.
yeah, you've got the floor.
I'll just start sharing now and then pop us into.
There we go. That's us, and as was mentioned there, top left slide is Outhouse, and an interior shot of it directly below it, and Stormy Castle to the right at the bottom, and on the top is the project we're going to talk about today. So here's our team. We started talking about teamwork, a lovely bunch of friends, really. We're a bit of a family. We go on visits, as you can see here, the Genedlaethol, the Gerthi Genedlaethol, the National Botanic Gardens of Wales near Carmarthen by Foster. And here we are in our studio environment. You can see us sitting there, sharing schemes, critting schemes. I'm the old man of the practice, so I'm the watercolor man with the pencil, which I have continuously with me in my hand. And we also allow all of our team to bring in their pets. So sometimes it's quite a crazy time here with lots of dogs causing mayhem. Moving on to the private residence Swansea, it's out in a sort of rural coastal environment in South Wales. Lovely building. And this slide shows a relatively early watercolor sketch I made of the proposal and the 4 years later, the finished product. And the importance of this is, I think it shows site analysis is key. Understand the location. If you're doing a bespoke project, get to know the site. We've put great emphasis on that. This is where it is. You can see to the bottom of that slide, the coastline, beautiful view. There was an existing house on the site, and this is it. Isn't it a beauty? Whilst we do follow the tenet of the most sustainable building is the one which already exists, and we believe very much that we should first of all look at adapting, there are times when it's better to take down and replace. And in this instance, this is a case in hand. It was in poor condition. It was poorly located. It's a bit of suburban architecture, if you can call it architecture, suburban building in a rural environment. And we decided it was much better to replace it with a highly insulated, energy efficient, well sealed, new build, purpose designed dwelling, designed and sited to respond to its context. And that's key in all of our work. It's a site-specific solution instead of a standard suburban box. This shows it again, and you can see the view, the central lowest slide, showing a magnificent view, which was right at the south end of the plot, and you couldn't see it from the existing house. Poorly located. You also see the topography. It's on a valley side, top left slide, section through the site. And these are the factors that drove our design decisions as we debated and discussed the solution to be. Ironically, our design guide here, which does feature one of our buildings as an exemplar of good design, but this sort of tick, yes, this is okay, and cross, this is no good, doesn't always apply. And that's a standard default approach. And this is so often the case in planning guidelines. I wish planning, particularly in Wales, it's more open and willing to listen, I'm afraid, in England. So we do a lot of buildings in England. This interestingly calls it new houses in the countryside. Well, in Wales, we haven't got a paragraph 80 and you're not allowed to build new houses in the countryside. You can do replacement houses, but not new ones. And I wish we had paragraph 80 in Wales. This is something, again, we do to try and interpret our clients' requirements. It's not just a written brief. It's trying to give a scale and an adjacency to the various components of the client's brief. And it just helps us get a feel of the scale of the building. And we do this a lot. We sketch in meetings in front of clients. I encourage hand drawing. It shows, A, that you really do understand your building that you're proposing, and it gives the client the opportunity to interact without a fait accompli. It's part of the evolution process back and forth between client and architect. We also talked early on about materiality. Tigaula, a project we did many years ago in Lisvane, North Cardiff, and the stone you see in the central slide is we also used actually for Tigaula, but that's local stone to the site near Swansea. So it's a Swansea quarry, and it's actually the offcuts that we use from them creating paving slabs primarily. Very interesting. And Kebony timber was chosen as the cladding. Reason for this, it gives a solid base. James will talk more about this, with a lighter upper stories, simply because of the topography of the site and needing to embed the lower level. Back to one of my sketches here and showing the context of the site and the sea view that we intended to exploit by stretching and weaving the new building around the existing trees, features, and topography of the land. There we are looking across the valley at the finished building, and you can see, I think it sits well within the site. It's a relatively quiet building, but I think it's also a strong building. I'm now going to hand over to James, who's going to take the story from here on.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Chris was saying, effectively, due to the topography, which we're looking directly onto the valley side in this image, the land falls closer to us. So our strategy was to have a lower level, which was effectively a plinth to the building, and then an upper two-story structure that was a timber frame, timber clad, and the Kebony then, as you can see, works really well with the tones of the valley. This is an area of outstanding natural beauty, one of the first created in the country. So we take seriously the kind of sensitivity of our projects and also the materiality in terms of the tone. We don't want something stark white standing out in a kind of sensitive location such as this. So as I talk you through the floor plans, which hopefully will be relatively interesting, I always love staring at a plan and enjoyed Bob's session just now. I really enjoyed that. So you can see basically we have a lower ground floor, a ground floor, which as you dress up the hill, this has direct access out, and then a first floor. So I'm just going to drop on the laser pointer here 1 second. So you can see from the red line site boundary, and the back here was the location where there are no existing trees of the original house. As Chris said, sat really far back in the hut site, whereas we know the south-facing lawn here has wonderful south views. So enter the site and you're into this forecourt area, which is the lower ground floor. So we've flipped north in this image here. So we've got a garaging space, plant, all the sort of auxiliary spaces, if you like, with the main entrance into this core. So you feel almost as if you're going underground. The materials here are solid, robust, retaining. And that's effectively the 3-story atrium that links the whole house together and includes, importantly, this idea of the indoor garden, a garden for all year round for a couple that loved gardening. I should say, actually, they also love their dogs. So this was the secondary door that took you straight into a washroom so you could hose them down straight from the beach, which is only a few minutes walk from the site. So as you arrive at the ground floor, you enter this wonderful atrium space with the indoor garden and a bridge above you that from leading to the access to first floor. The house then is principally divided by a series of measures, including a central axis that runs through the building with an olive tree at one end as a feature lit at night and a view at the other. At the front of the house is the main space, the kitchen, living, dining with a small utility. And then in the back of the house, I say the back, the north end of the house, there's more insular spaces, a snug with a wood burner, still with views out to the wonderful trees, a study to work from home, and then 3 guests bedrooms back here. The house is predominantly occupied by a couple, so these rooms may be used less frequently, but equally they all have connections with the outside, connections with the landscape, which is key to the brief. They also, through a series of sort of hidden sliding doors, don't become rooms that are shut off and sort of musty because they're rarely used. You know, you can use the space of bedroom 2 here because you look through it and beyond it. Then back to the atrium, the stairs then as a 3-story feature lead up to kind of the principal bedroom where the couple are able to go. It's kind of, you know, you can access the whole house, but you don't necessarily go up here. So the bridge link provides access into the main bedroom and then the ensuite, the bath with a view to die for. And there's even a little Juliet balcony, which you'll see there. So you can open this, cross ventilation, all sorts of things, look into the canopy of the trees. Photovoltaics are set back, not to be overshadowed by this, and directly south facing, and one of the means that we put into the overall sustainability strategy. This is a section of the site, as you can see, working with the existing contours. The lower level is embedded and has this sort of solid plinth idea with the atrium, living spaces, and that pop-up giving the main bedroom the wonderful south view as well. Sections through the site, you can see the atrium there as the main space, log burner and this large garage providing storage at the base. And a section there going back to that original section, as Chris said, site analysis, absolutely crucial. It's funny because the house that's on a steep site, virtually every room is able to walk out onto ground. So the connections with the landscape are wonderful. So we're going to basically take you through a short sort of journey through the house now, through these photographs, and I will turn off this awful red dot before we do that. So this is the entrance view, maintaining the levels of the original entrance, but drastically changing the massing on the site, working with the trees. We felt these were quite beautiful established trees, that we wanted to try and protect. And you can see the landscaping that the client, who are clean gardeners, have already started to put into work with that. As you approach up to the building, this pergola, which will eventually be wrapped with the wisteria, creates a sort of forecourt and a sense of arrival. Inevitably, this is the space where cars need to be before they get in the garage. And this is just an example of the sorts of sketches we might produce when we're on site, as Chris says, with the client. One of the difficulties here was the client was taking a very strong approach to the landscape, but once the building had been built, we needed to reprofile the contours back to the original topography, and we didn't want the materials to sort of be stuck onto the building or structures come off the building. So we used a mixture of natural stone in this image here, as well as sleepers, which you'll see elsewhere. In the corner here, which you can see in the next slide, is the, oh, sorry, that's the wrong slide. I was just going to say, that's the main entrance there and the secondary entrance into the dog shower room. The garage door is a lovely little product by Rundum Meyer. It curves round and makes access into the garage slightly easier. And you can see there the corner window, making sure that even those rooms in the back half of the house, if you like, are getting wonderful views, which again you'll see. This is the natural stone that Chris mentioned that we'd used previously. It's from a quarry nearby, built by local masons. And we included little things in that. There's a boot scraper to remove the mud from your shoes. We rotated some of the stones so that you can hang up the dog lead and your coat so it dries outside. And then you can see the entrance is open there. You pass through the stone into this core at the base of the building. And in there, we've exposed the concrete to show that the retaining structure is, to explain the language basically of the building. As you rise up then through the core, the 3-story staircase, you can see how the ground level steps using the building as a retaining structure, and this almost floating cantilevering stair provides a feature in the atrium, whilst also giving access to all 3 levels in a kind of clear and legible way. So as you arrive at that floor, you're into this atrium space, the indoor garden, which is just such an unusual thing to have in the house. I mean, it purely came from the client's brief and this idea, well, why can't you have these amazing trees inside? So the planter pit is on your right, and then we're looking south towards that wonderful view and the main living space. In the atrium, we wanted to play on the concept of inside and outside, and so we use different materials such as cork here, which is great for an acoustic point of view. It adds texture, and whilst the rest of the house is a relatively sort of hard surfaces such as the tile and the walls, this just adds a contrast to this main space. And you'll see other materials we've used as well include moss on the wall and planting at that lower level, which will eventually grow up and feel like it's coming from the atrium, from the base of the atrium. We also brought the kebony that is used on the outside and wrapped that inside. So you have this idea of, again, inside outside materials. And this is the view effectively looking the opposite way down to the olive tree I mentioned earlier. Moving into the main kitchen living dining space, you can see that wonderful view starting to emerge and this idea of an infinity lawn. And that's me looking very contemplative, or perhaps suicidal at the end of the project, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is the main space using the Internorm HS330 system. So that's a really robust triple glazed product that comes in handy when it doesn't, because it doesn't always look like this in Wales, as much as you might all think that. And you can just see there how the glazing was wrapped around the corner to continue those views towards the west and the sunset, but also give you this sense of privacy, because there are other houses in the valley. You can see the wonderful beach there as well, which, you know, twice a day just looks absolutely different as the tide goes in and out. Moving out onto that lawn, then looking back at the house, you can see how the kind of main living spaces for the couple are looking onto that view. So at first floor, you've got the bedroom, the ensuite, and then the main kitchen living space. And if you recognise one of the client's lovely little dogs there enjoying the sun. That's a south-facing elevation, so we've got the overhang as part of the solar control measures for overheating. And you can just see how, I think in this image, how the Kebony works so well with the existing trees. And it really is a beautiful material that silvers over time, and something the client was really passionate about. So we used a secret fixing detail. We also chose consciously a brown grey for all of the materials. So it wasn't this sort of, it was more of a natural tone. And you can see how the interior is actually a just off white. And there's all these subtleties, I think, that really helped tonally with the building. As you move in, we're passionate about interiors. We don't believe that the building kind of stops from the outside, much like the previous schemes we've seen this morning. And I think that, you know, the kitchens are so important to all of us. We used here a technique we have in the past where we're basically closing off part of the kitchen. You can see on the left-hand side there, where you can kind of put all those utensils that you might not want out in on display. Moving back through then to the atrium with the dining space on the left, and Ed the cat, who's sadly no longer with us, who also matches tonally with the colours of the house. We didn't choose him. As you pass again through the atrium, you go into those spaces that perhaps you want to feel more enclosed, snug. So you've got the snug sitting room, TV room. Beyond that, then, this is an example of one of those bedrooms where you've got this view across the pergola towards the atrium, but also to the trees and the sea beyond. So making sure that those spaces equally have interest and intrigue. And just looking out that window, we really like this idea of one of the challenges, I guess, with living at ground floor when you have a lower ground floor is people come to the house, and this idea of potentially a Juliet balcony where you can open the door and say, hey guys, come on up. So yeah, again, another just thinking about how people are going to live in the house. Then back to the atrium, we're almost done now with our tour. You can see the main atrium space then acts in many ways as a navigation device, but also we've got two opening roof lights that are linked to the home automation system, and they help for stack event, drawing that air from the front of the house up and out, and also you know, something that safe that you can leave open overnight with rain sensors, etc. And the stairs uses local oak that's been made by a company close to us. And then up at this high level, you're in the canopy of the trees, if you like, still with this extent of cork, framing a view to the sea and into the main bedroom. The Juliet balcony is on the right there, just so, again, you can see and look out at the driveway, potentially if you're at that level of the house and someone calls at the gate. The main bedroom looks over a sedum roof that is that was only plugged, so it's established now, but not the time of the photos. Again, careful consideration to blinds, lighting, all sorts of detail. And on our left, we just step through into the main bedroom with the bath with a view, and you can see now the tide has gone out by the time we've photographed the house, and it's just a lovely space and so private up there. And lastly, then looking at the house at night with this atrium, as I said, the house is in this sort of small valley, close-knit community who have been very amenable during the construction period for a small site access. But we're told that the neighbours love the house at night because it's something beautiful to look out at, with the atrium lit. I must say that obviously this has been lit for the photograph, so we're not blaring lights every night into the middle of the gower.
And end to end, another one of my sketches early on, showing the client's dog there. Something I was listening to a talk by John Party, the architect, the other day, who said really important to show the client's dogs. They love those paintings. And so we included the dog, and then the final slide is the reality, the built product at the end. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That was great. Thank you, Chris and James. Very nicely done. You see, we segued from one to the other very, very fluidly. Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions here. I know we're kind of like slightly pressed for time as a result of our technical issues, but there's obviously clearly a lot of questions. You may want to take a look at them in the chat. But the first thing was, it struck me actually. I mean, fantastic looking house, really embedded in its landscape. I mean, a couple of people have been asking the same question. How did you manage to not damage any of those trees? The proximity to the site is incredible.
Yeah, very careful, very accurate setting out, working with very good structural engineers, and just generally taking care. And I think that's something, it's easy to draw things if you haven't got the right people to help you build the solutions. It's no good at all. It's a team effort. Just like we're a team, we like to bring everybody involved with the project on board and work carefully and sensitively. And in a place like the Gower, you've got to respect the environment there.
I think also one of the, as Chris said, one of the first things was the levels of the site. So obviously retaining trees, you can't go changing the ground levels around them. And so those datums that were established really fed into how we stacked up, if you like, sectionally the building. And in some ways led to this sort of linear form of the house.
Yeah, it's back to site analysis. Understanding.
I mean, I was very kind of interested. I mean, how much of this was were your design decisions internally? I mean, I'm really drawn to the exterior. I just think it's so beautifully embedded. I look at some of the interior choices and I think, how much was you and how much was the architect? I mean, when you say that it's a constant negotiation, of course it should be. It's their home. What did you compromise on what choices got made in that design? Because obviously you can clearly, in a sense, it's clearly a very expensive home. It's so highly specified. What were choices that you compromised on when you did it? What did the client not want to move on to?
I don't think we see it as a compromise. I think we see it as genuinely working together to get the best solution. That we structure our appointment terms slightly differently, I think, to a lot of architects, in as much as we do a very thorough feasibility study as we're evolving the scheme to ensure that aspiration meets budget, works with the planners, and it's pulling all of those parties together and to prove that it genuinely is feasible. And everybody respects one another, and therefore it's not a compromise, it's a working for the optimum end result. And that means everybody sometimes has to cut their cloth, only slightly. I mean, we can go quite.
Doesn't look like there was an awful lot of cutting going on there, to be honest.
I think a specific example on this one might be that we were keen to expose the concrete as you go in at that lower level to tell the story that it is effectively a concrete shell, a concrete base. They loved this stone that we've used perfectly, and equally we do. But the plan was there to lose the concrete effectively. When they came on site, because they were heavily involved, when they came on site and they saw the concrete, then they bought into that vision. And because it was simply putting plasterboard over it, it was easy to just not do that. So that was an example where, you know, we work together as a compromise, I suppose.
I mean, I mean, the moss wall, is that kind of happily continuing to live? I mean, it's luminous in its nature.
So it's preserved moss, so it continues to have qualities such as sound absorption and air purifying, but it is a preserved moss.
Oh wow! I mean, it looks like it has some fantastic spaces there. I mean, in terms of spatially bringing you in and taking you up into the garden. I mean, it's beautifully done. I mean, there's the view. It must be a fantastic house to move around. I really like what you did in terms of incorporating the whole house. Like you say, it's a couple. Too often houses kind of close down, and I like that idea that using sliding screens allows you to just enjoy the house. Or close it down as you wish, but you're not kind of, as you say, creating a wing that's just shut down and nobody sees.
Well, that's interesting you should say that, because swinging it away from the one-off house to housing, one of the difficulties I think with housing is that you don't necessarily know the end user at the time you're making design decisions. So in order to allow people to have an involvement in the home that they make when they move in, because we design houses, they make homes, to introduce these elements, and James is brilliant at it, of flexibility and sliding portions and things that can move about and let people have a degree of say in their living pattern.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've got friends of mine living in the Southampton Road flats by Neve Brown, and he was a master at doing that stuff, creating sliding screens that just allow you to kind of create and tailor your space as you wish to use it. It's such a lovely idea, so simple and so effective. Thank you very much indeed for having shown the project. It was great. Thank you very much, James and Chris. I'm sorry to have to move on, even though there's loads of questions, but I realise we're running late. But thanks for the presentation.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And we will now move on to our second sponsor presentation. Thank you very much indeed for waiting, Tony. I apologise.
Okay, very interesting talk. Very interesting.
No, they are. They really are. But our next presentation is from Max Light and Tony Coleman, who's their director. At 16, Tony started training as a QS for a rapidly growing building company, but lacked motivation and wanted to learn the practical skills. So he went on to the tools. At 22, he started balustrading installation company and soon found a niche traveling nationally and internationally, surveying and training teams of fitters. Manufacturing naturally followed, and the rest is history. You're talking about concept to handover, giving us your glazing challenge. Having seen, the last house, actually, it's just amazing what kind of like well-specified glazing, how it lets you kind of enjoy, not only kind of perform in terms of environmentally, but also open out kind of amazing views for the users of the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely fantastic example. I just hope they've considered how they're going to clean the glass, because I often say to my clients, we can do the most amazing glazing, but Rolls Royces aren't naturally clean. They're only usually clean because there's a chauffeur or a gopher who cleans them every week, and that's why they shine and they polish. So you've always got to consider how you're going to maintain things. It's very important.
I'm sure they factored that one in.
100%. There was definitely room in that garage for a cherry picker.
Oh my God, yeah. Lovely. Anyway, Max.
Okay, Max Light, yeah, let me start. Okay,
off you go.
Thank you for the intro. As you say, I founded Max Light, a glazing company, which has got over 80 staff many years ago. And once I'd been working for a building company, I realized that I wanted to do something for myself. So I started traveling the world, and we installed predominantly a German system of nylon-coated balustrading on diverse projects, ranging from MI5's new projects in new offices in Westminster, to a block of flats in Moscow, from roofs in Hackney to staircases in Hong Kong. And we traveled far and wide and soon gained a reputation for first-class workmanship at a fair cost. And I thrived on the multitude of challenges that building up such an operation threw at me. I soon needed my own workshop, and so it wasn't long before I set up my first factory in Fulham, to the annoyance of some of my neighbours, as it was a 2-storey building, and there was a small budding architectural practice above us, and the noise must have been quite challenging. In fact, I know it was, because on more than one occasion they told me so, and I do apologise if you're watching this. We all need a bit of luck, and my first big break came when I met Belsize Architects and Structural Engineers Elliott Wood Partnership. They gave me the challenge of creating this glass cascade on the back of a house in Highgate, which still to this day is regularly featured as part of open house. We not only made and fitted all the structural architectural elements, we also glazed and sealed the entire area, including bespoke stainless steel guttering and trims. But as we grew, we needed larger premises, but always stayed in West London. We've now been in Northampton for over 6 years, and we're on our 8th factory where we produce all of our glazing, and we still have our 7th factory where we fabricate our ferrous metalwork and store all of our aluminium, as these materials need to be kept separately. When the recent worldwide supply issues hit, we never dropped below 6 months worth of material stock, which confirmed that all this additional storage, which is terribly expensive in the middle of London, was fully justified, as it protected our lead times in uncertain times. Over the years, we've accumulated a massive depth of talent and have superb facilities and an unrivaled supply chain. Come and visit us and see for yourself the beating heart of Max Light. We welcome visitors 6 days a week. Bring your clients or just send them to us and we'll look after them. We know that when people visit us and see manufacturing actually taking place in West London, their minds are put at rest. And let's face it, who doesn't like a factory tour? We only market B2B and also maintain an active social presence with an ever increasing following, currently at around 12,000. It's a fantastic way to let our clients feel part of a greater experience. We've recently helped to contribute to many award-winning designs for the RIBAJ Don't Move Improve Awards. We had great success, as you can see here, with Procter & Shaw Architects, and also more success with Paul Archer Design. But all of our clients get the same first-class treatment, as ultimately you are creating beautiful, comfortable spaces for your clients to live and work in, and they must be of good value. We were recently on an episode of Grand Designs. Although the critical big ticket item might have been the seamless glazing, we know that we've only got it right if it looks fantastic, keeps the building secure and the correct temperature, and allows unobtrusive views of the garden. All of these things must be right and work together, and let's face it, you wouldn't put a Turner in a clip frame. Only Banksy can get away with that. Using Maxlight, you have a greater choice, as we've developed our own aluminium profiles completely from scratch for sliding, pivot and hinge door systems. We also have our own roof light system and are constantly testing out new ideas and pushing the boundaries of glazing. You may have seen the much copied first Oriel Bay window that we installed over 15 years ago for Platform 5 Architects in Hackney, with a massive pivot door to boot. The pivot door was made by starting with standard Schuko sections and then adapting them to use in different ways, which nobody else had done before. We later went on to make our own more refined sections as the ideas developed. We are particularly proud to have provided the glazing for the award-winning, superbly detailed Old Parchment Factory for Will Gamble Architects. In fact, Bob Prewett, you mentioned earlier about the House of the Year Awards coming up this Wednesday at Channel 4, and I spotted that the Old Parchment Factory was in the credits at the beginning, and I know it's shortlisted. So it's us against you. Good luck, Bob. But I hope Will Gamble wins. Now, it's not just these iconic or standalone one-off projects that get me out of bed every day. It's hundreds of perfectly executed, streamlined, minimalist installations that make me proud of what my team have done so far. In September, I went to GlassTech, a massive exhibition in Germany with over 1,800 exhibitors, to learn for myself some of the many new things happening in our industry and to enable me to share them with you and in future our clients. All of these examples are too subtle to illustrate in slides in this webinar as they relate to glass. But for example, there are new types of glass being developed to prevent bird strikes by laser printing translucent patterns within them. More excitingly, there is super insulated glazing now available with a vacuum in between the two sheets of glass, with the held only 1/10 of a millimeter apart by microscopic pillars. This glass offers a U value of 0.7, which is comparable to triple glazing, but only 1/5 of the thickness. It is going to be the new thing of the future. The insulation value can be further improved by building up the layers, as this unique glazing also uses no argon. It can only be a good thing. There are currently limitations with the maximum sizes being a generous 2.5 by 1.5 meters, but this will improve. Standard glazing at the moment, we can make double glazed units up to 6 by 3 meters, and we have done so. You can see some quite large ones in this slide. Production can take a little longer with this new type of glazing, but this will come down the more people insist on the best and they are willing to invest in it. And with building regulations constantly being tightened up, it is our joint responsibility to build better buildings. Only a few years ago, low emissivity glass was a special, as was argon filling of double glazing. Now it's a standard. When we used to try to educate people how to use solar gain and how you could benefit from it, we were often assumed just to be double glazing salesmen trying to upsell our products. But we all have to think of the bigger picture and use the planet's limited energy wisely. With the new building regulations for ventilation coming into force next year, We are working on alternative solutions to this problem, including tiny fans built into our head tracks, which offer better control and don't just make the frames leaky, like being suggested by using trickle vents. There's a lot of confusion within the industry at the moment on the most efficient way to achieve this, and there's a lot more work to do, and we all have to do this together. More use needs to be made of photovoltaic technology, and hopefully one day the great nirvana will break through with clear glazing elements actually generating power to be used, say, for light in the buildings in the evening. If we don't dream, we don't try these things, we will not progress. I like Formula One racing. If an F1 team found an advantage of, say, just 0.5% in performance, they would be absolutely ecstatic. In the recent USA Grand Prix, the time difference for the whole race between the winners and the last finishers was just over 100 seconds, or 1.6%. That's from the very best to the very worst. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to refine it and not accept mediocrity. At Maxlight, we are currently reworking all of our products to be able to fit triple glazing within. We've found that over the years, if we raise the standard, quality always delivers the best value, and clients are smart enough to know that cheapest is not always the best. When most people build the house of their dreams, they are in it for the long game, and it is our combined duty to help them. Some similar companies to ours might say it can't be done or are not prepared to help you achieve the detail that you really want. But we understand that you two are trying to sell a vision of what inspires your clients, and not everybody just wants concertina doors. Currently, 84% of our business is repeat clients. And I'm never happier than when we get repeat business, say from the same builder or architect, as every time proves to me we must be getting something right. Now, I may be trying to paint the perfect picture, and we all know that perfection doesn't exist. But at Maxlight, we are constantly striving for it. As we are our own supply chain and less affected by outside factors, we are more in control of our own destiny. We're not at the mercy of subcontractors or external fabricators, and the only limiting factor is your ambition. If you need a reliable, well-established supply crew with fantastic lead times to help you make all of these things happen, come and visit us and see what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. That was a nice presentation. Some lovely buildings there by lots of good architects.
We'd be nothing without those architects.
Well, I actually just got a message here from Chris Lloyd, who was like saying, you know, do remember, Tony, we used Maxlight last year and we're really happy with that glazing. So there we go. There's nothing like personal recommendations.
Thank you.
I mean, do you find, I mean, like in working with architects, I mean, at that kind of level, so obviously these are quite high spec houses, you know, the ones that we've been looking at. Do you think that do you enjoy the involvement of kind of working with architects in order to kind of innovate on your own products? Because it's forcing you to do that effectively, isn't it?
I absolutely love it, because we learn from each other. And I mean, for example, I can remember Richard Paxton, who Paxton Locker Architects, who he's sadly demised. Yeah. He used to come down to our workshop, and he was another one who sketched all the time, but he used to carry a roll of tracing paper. He used to literally walk around and he'd get his roll of tracing paper out on a dirty bench and he'd say, can you do this? Can you do that? And sometimes it was a bit of a pain in the arse, but we all learned from it and we all gained from it and we all moved on. And some of the things that he created were absolutely fantastic. I mean, when we mentioned that Oriel Bay window that we did for Platform 5 Architects many years ago. If they hadn't have done that, I mean, we probably had 100 or 150 repeat projects from that one job alone, because it was just somebody saying, can you do this? And it was quite a large one. It had a day bed sitting in it. I mean, if you look at the photographs, you could actually sleep in there. It was big enough, possibly a little bit too big for the average one. But somebody said, can you do this? And it's just like, well, why can't we? Let's try it. And we did it together. And, you know, then we refined the idea and we still go on. In fact, I'm just going to move my camera, and that is another Platform 5 job up there behind me, which was his house up in the Norfolk Broads, which we did together. We love working with other architects. With architects, it's the most important thing.
Well, I've got a question here from Hannah C, who says they're nice looking products, but was not able to detail the sliding door and pivot to avoid a thermal bridge at the threshold. As the products need to be fixed into a concrete upstand, is this something you might be looking at in the future?
Yeah, we've had issues. We were she must know our details if she's referring to concrete upstands, because we were always insisting on concrete upstands because we were worried about the stability of the product. Possibly more importantly now, we as I mentioned in my waffle quite a lot, we have to consider energy values, and we have to look at insulated upstands, and this is something we're working on because it is so critical to stop the thermal bridging. And yeah, it's very much something we're working on. But the biggest problem we've found is finding the right substrate which we can bolt into that is waterproof and that has got good thermal values. But we will not stop. We've got tests. I'm sort of sitting above the factory here. We've got about 3 or 4 test rigs in the factory, and every day we're breaking something, pouring water on something, we're testing something, we're air pressurizing. We do it all ourselves before we go off for finite testing for British standards. So it is something we're working on all the time.
Brilliant. And tell me a little bit about what's the difference in the cost factor? You were mentioning the vacuum glass as opposed to triple glazing being, what did you say, like nearly 5 times thinner?
Yeah.
What's the current cost differential between specifying, say, triple glazing then and the vacuum glass?
I think at the moment to do a proper cost analysis on it, triple glazing and this glazing is very similar. But from our point of view, the slight problem we've got is this glazing is so thin, our glass is nearly always structural. So when we've got our super thin frames, it's because the glazing is acting as the structure. So we've got to get a fine balance of getting enough structure within the unit. So we will still probably double glaze them. But it will be expensive. It costs money.
So yes, but at the moment you're just saying that you're currently able to produce them at 2.5 by 1.5.
That's with this new super insulated glass. That's the biggest that these glass units can go up to.
Yeah.
Which is big. I mean, that's quite a decent. That's not
a small size, is it? Certainly in terms of its height.
No, I mean that is, you know, it's a very common size, but we do a lot of doors which are bigger than that because we tend to work on quite a few projects which are, you know, absolute one-offs. So we're frequently doing doors which are 2.5 meters square or even bigger. Yeah,
maybe not too long before you hit the kind of 6 by 8 meter sizes you've got for your double glazing either, hopefully.
Well, I don't want to name drop, but there is somebody. We did a pair of doors which were 6 by 3 meters for each leaf. There was a pair of doors which biparted in the center. But I think I probably got her permission, and she's a great designer and everybody's heard of her. I know Dab's in a good band from Liverpool, but I haven't got any photographs to share of that project. But that was a pretty amazing job. But I have to be very discreet.
Well, hopefully we'll see it at some point in the future, Tony, at some point. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation, and running slightly over time still. Now come to our last presentation, so I hope everybody's still here. This is by Matt Barnes, Director of Can. He's the Director of Can, an architecture and idea studio based in London. Since its formation in 2016, Can has built a reputation for creating striking and idiosyncratic projects underwritten by cultural and historical research that explore how materials can create different themes and atmospheres. Can was included in the Observer's Top 5 Architecture of 2020 and were recognised with a RIBAJ Rising Star Award in 2021. Are you there, Matt?
I'm here.
Hello, Matt. How are you? I'm sorry it's been so late. Thank you. You've been there.
It's all right.
Waiting. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you've been watching them anyway, because they were lovely presentations.
Yeah, I've been watching them, and they've been making me more nervous as I've gone through them.
Oh well, last but not least.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We were on a slightly different scale to all of the previous projects, but hey.
No, it's nice. I mean, the different scales is what's lovely. You know, we're all working at different scales, so that's all good, isn't it?
Exactly. Right. Shall I jump in?
Please do.
There we go. So thanks for the introduction. Yeah, we're a small practice. We're in Catford, in southeast London, and we previously in Shoreditch. We moved down here in January. We work on a mix of residential, mainly private, and we've got some exhibition work. We do some installations with artists. There's quite a range of small projects, ranging from anywhere from £5,000 all the way up to about £1 million at the moment is our top project. Yeah, so let me just get into it. So Mountain View is actually my own house, and we completed this in September 2020. So we didn't use Max Light, but if we did, I'm sure the glazing would have been on time, because the glazing is what caused a 6-month delay on this project. So we'll be calling Tony next time. So the house itself, this is just a photograph from a drone showing the location. So you can see the Crystal Palace TV tower in the background. So I think I'm just going to, I'll run through it. It's sort of a tour through the house, and then with different ideas and references coming in and why we made certain decisions. So from the outside of the house, at the street, and the street is quite interesting in that it's all Edwardian, but each of the plots were sold off to different builders. So we've got a huge range of styles along the street. So as you start at the lower end of the street, there's quite a big bank of terraces which all look the same, and then you have a mixture of detached and semi-detached houses as you get towards the end of the street, which we're at. So we're on the right hand side in this picture. So this is a semi-detached Edwardian house, very strange layout in that typically with these types of houses you would have 2 rooms at the front of the house in the wider part of the house, and then a much skinnier rear wing, whereas actually this house has just got 1 room in the wider part of the house at the front, and the back of the house is actually only about half a meter narrower than the front of the house. So from the front, we really wanted to kind of maintain the kind of context and not piss the neighbors off, in short. And so it's kind of designed as a bit of a sleeper house. So from the front, you wouldn't know anything was different to normal. And then as you progress through the plan, everything becomes a bit freer and a bit more wild. So just a little on the state of the house that we found it in. So it hadn't been lived in for 6 years, and it was leaking, it was drafty, there was 1 hot tap, and so it was, all the windows had been replaced by either PVC or aluminium. So on the front we replaced, we reinstated wooden sash, and then on the back of the house we put in new aluminium and timber windows. So the front, here you can see a bit of the plan of the ground floor. So this is before. So you can see what I was talking about earlier, where the wider part of the house is a single room at the front, and then you get through to the back of the house. And this really was a warren of small rooms. We had an externally accessed boiler room, externally accessed toilet. This was kind of, you wouldn't really call it a dining room. It had a large cooking stove in this chimney, and then you stepped 1 step down into the kitchen area here. So there's 3 cupboards here, and this was a little pantry. This was a little shed. So this is completed plan. So it was at the front of the house, we really sought to maintain the existing proportions, and then we designed the flow and plan. So as you move from front door to rear, the plan expands horizontally, horizontally and vertically, so in plan and section. So this chamfer was existing, so then we copied this chamfer here, and then as you get down to the extension, which is this zone here, we again pushed it out just to keep that staggered expansion going as we get through the space. Oop. Zoomed in a bit much, yeah. So on the left-hand side is how we found it. So you come through the front door and your eye is drawn by these columns which dance through the space. So they were really designed to be off, they weren't on a grid. So we set them so they would kind of echo the site of the back is surrounded by quite a lot of trees. So it was kind of like, how do we enhance that with the silhouettes of the columns, and they sort of like lead you down the space. So we kept the existing staircase here. We just renovated it. So this is the kitchen and dining space leading on to the extension. And you can see here, we've got, I think the head heights are about 3.4 meters here, because the site naturally slopes from front to back. This is the existing section to the top, and this is the completed section here. You can see in this section that previously there was one step between the front and the back of the house, and then there was quite a drop to this kind of sloping area here, and then when you got to this point here, there was a further drop to the garden. So when we were taking up the existing floorboards at the back, we thought how we really wanted to kind of spread that transition across the plan. So there was no point. You were basically met with a cliff face, and we were really lucky in that when we took up the floorboards, there was about a meter of space underneath the floorboards until we got to the footings of the existing walls. So we could lower the floor finish by about a meter without having to underpin the external walls, and that really allowed these spaces to really have a huge head height. And normally when we're restricted, when we're doing extensions by neighboring properties, in terms of how high we can go, because our floor level is considerably lower than the neighbor we're attached to, we're afforded 3 meter high head height in the extension. So the openings on the party wall, not the party wall, the flank wall, sorry, which were these here. Oh, sorry, these here. Instead of creating new openings, we kept the existing ones. All the lintels were timber and they were rotten, so we replaced them with concrete. And so this was basically, this level here was the existing floor level. So we maintained them, and then 3 are now external openings of windows, and then this is a little doorway through to this little unplanned space in the extension. Another construction shot. I think this project was done on a really tight budget, and we concentrated on trying to not let any waste leave site, or as little as possible. So we kept the existing brick wall of the back house, and then that became shelves, and all of the bricks that we took out were then used in the patio at the rear of the house. So the mountain. We were working on a exhibition at the John Soane Museum at the time of when we were designing this, and we were working with an artist who was very interested in sort of like long time and rocks and asteroids, and we were talking about the design of this extension, and we were talking about we really wanted this idea of this like thin structural frame which appeared too thin to lift up what was on top of the roof. And so we were joking around what the kind of like, what's the heaviest thing you can put on a roof, and we settled on a mountain. And so we were doing a lot of research for this independent exhibition, and we came across these images of a ride in Disneyland Paris under construction. So this is, I think it's in San Diego, I might have got that wrong, but it's basically a hyper realistic copy of the Matterhorn mountain in Europe, and this is it during construction. So they basically built the internal steel skeletal frame, and then they used hyper-realistic sort of like concrete from the top down. So the reason they made it from the top down is so they wouldn't drop any concrete on the previously completed mountain below. And then there's a bobsled ride which runs through the middle. So this image really struck a chord with me, and I thought, why not riff off that? Here's another image of it being constructed. And this is what we ended up with. So we wanted this mountain to be a lot more sort of like billboardy. So we've used a really thin aluminium, foamed aluminium. So it's basically, I think recycled, I think it's like 97% recycled aluminium, and it's melted down. And then when it's in its molten state, bubbles are passed through it. It's kind of, the way I describe it normally is like an aero bar. So you can specify whether you have small, medium or large bubbles. And so this is large bubble, and it's 44 mil thick, and it's basically stuck with structural adhesive to a subframe. So then these columns act as kind of like the skeletal frame, which hold it up on legs, and they also line up with the frames of the windows to kind of like make the glazing kind of like disappear, and then so you get your view through to these crumbling brick walls. There's a bit more of a zoomed in view of the aluminium. Again, on the waste, just while I've got this image up. So as I mentioned earlier, we tried to keep all of the waste on site and reuse it. So this aluminium came in sheets, rectangular sheets. So when we water jet cut the mountain shape, the waste mountain, or the sort of like negative, was used on this side flank here as the mountain range. And this was a bit of a test, but I think it's a good doing your own house as an architect is a perfect opportunity to try things that you wouldn't necessarily try on a client's house that hadn't been tried before. So the waste, we used the recycled plastic for the kitchen, and the waste offcuts we used to dress the lintels, the concrete lintels above the windows externally. So you can see this here. So the whole project it hasn't got really kind of like one overarching concept. It's kind of just like a mix of ideas and references. And so once we had the mountain idea, then other ideas of landscape elements came in. So my wife is a geographer, so that's where that kind of link came in. So we had the mounting externally, and then we imagined the dining room wall as caves. So we've gone for this kind of like textured concrete, which is literally just flicked on. We work with a contractor to do it as affordable as possible. So it's basically stick in the mix at the top, and it's like a drum, and it's got a handle that flicks it onto the wall. So we had the dining room was cave, and then we made the dining table as well. So you can see that here it's got this like, it's a ripply kind of like steel enamel, which is made on the Isle of Wight, and it's actually the same company that make all of the underground signs for the underground. And so that was imagined as lake, so you get this kind of like contrast with the material of the wall. The kitchen itself was very cheap IKEA. I made it with a friend, and then we got these sheets of recycled, I think it's recycled, so the blue is recycled chopping boards and full fat milk bottle tops, the blue ones, and the black and white is recycled chopping boards and microwave meal trays, single-use plastic. So it's quite a cheap material, but it's very labor intensive because it's quite soft, so you have to basically sand it through all of the grades. It was a lot of labor, but we ended up with this, which again complements this idea of nature, because these landscape elements, because you've got these kind of like, it's quite overt, marbly graphic. Another shot of the kitchen. So again, where we had finishes, instead of layering another layer of plaster on them. We just used what we had and painted them if they were in a decent state. We've got a downdraft extractor which goes under the floor and out of the wall. Some more shots. So once we had the landscape elements, we then were talking about these columns dancing through the space and talking about how do you measure a landscape. So the columns became ranging poles, which surveyors use, and the changing color is the same height from the floor at every level. So as you step down the plan, the line steps down with you, so it's always at the same height. And then one of the extravagances of this project, we got these custom made survey marker tiles which are dotted around the terrazzo floor randomly, so you get this another way of measuring a landscape. And you can see here we renovated the existing stairwell. So the brick demolished wall, I was keen to, because we found the house in a bit of a semi-derelict state, and we were talking about ideas of, is a building project ever finished, and how do you know if it's finished? And again, we were working on this Sohn exhibition, so John Sohn was very interested in this idea that a project is never finished. So a lot of his drawings are of his projects with scaffolding all over it. Very few of them actually complete on, I guess you call it, practical completion, but then a lot of drawings like of his projects in their eventual ruined state. So we quite like this idea of keeping this memory of the existing building, but having a question mark of it: is it being demolished or is it being built? And so we were looking at the idea of what is the archetypal demolished or ruined wall, and we got to this. There's a scene in Train Spotting which I just remembered, where he's got these ruined blockwork walls and you've got these acro props holding up this steel, and that for me compositionally worked perfectly. So we kind of emulated this here, and these columns, only one of them is needed for structure, the other is superficial to really frame the brickwork and then frame the view out to the garden. One of the other things we found in the house was this pressed iron fireplace, where in one of the bedrooms. So we put it in the extension as kind of like, if it was good enough for Corbusier in this roof terrace apartment, we thought, why not? Why isn't it good enough for us? And so it's kind of like surreal fireplace which would never work because there's no chimney, and we've sprayed it in this fake sort of stone effect spray paint, which is typically used in like NAF arts and crafts. Some more niche architectural references. So looking at the trusses for the extension, so we wanted them to be as I mentioned earlier, as sort of like thin and fragile in inverted commas looking. So by doing laser cut steel, we could space the trusses wider apart than if they were timber joists. And we were looking at the Hopkins house, and where they use a proprietary system, we did a sort of like lo-fi version of basically just laser cutting sheet steel and then welding a flange on the top. And so we're kind of like low-tech, high-tech. One of the strange thing about doing a project for yourself as an architect is that you don't produce many drawings. So this is one of the only drawings that we actually produced. So Waste Not Want Lot. This is a slightly different reference coming in. So this is one of my favorite plates, just by A.W. Pugin, and it's a bread plate. And so we wanted it's slightly personal reference, in that is something that my grandmother would always say in the kitchen. She'd always say, waste not, want not, like relentlessly. So that and it's on that phrase on my favorite plate. And we also felt it linked into this idea of not removing any waste from site if possible, and then being in the kitchen, that whole idea of using all of the food that you can and not throwing anything away. It's very tricky putting words in architecture because everyone is very personal and someone will guarantee to have an issue with it, but hey. So the front living room is designed in the sort of opposite to the rest of the ground floor. So where that is like light and bright colors, wanted the living room to give it a different atmosphere. So it's got this very dark blue room. And again, the Soane reference. I was quite interested in this idea of obviously all of the stuff on the walls in the Soane Museum, all of these stolen antiquities are priceless, and I wanted the act of putting on something on a wall, does that give it some value? So we went to the local plasterworks and asked them if they had any seconds or offcuts that we could have or buy for a small price, and we were in luck because he just basically said, everything you see on the shelves, take it, I'll be trying to get rid of it for ages. So we got all of these random bits of cornice, plaster, ceiling roses, everything. So we had a pile in the middle of the room and we just arranged them on the wall in the best composition we felt, and then just paint them all blue. Some more shots of that. Some more. So quickly on the first floor, we didn't. There's more light touch up here. So it was existing. We had 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. The bathroom was here, and this was like a really strange room because it's only the width of the hallway below, and couldn't really fit anything in there. So by splitting this bedroom at the back into 2, we put a bathroom in there and a smaller bedroom, and then by removing this chimney, which was connected to the big cooking stove below, we were able to equal these rooms out a bit. The main change upstairs is we opened up the hallway to the rafters. So this space in the existing house was the darkest. It's quite a long first floor corridor. So by opening it up and putting a very normal size roof light in, we really transformed this space. So you can see on the left hand side how it was, and the right hand side how it is now. And we kept in all of the existing structure to use both as a framework for the lights and also as a feature. So you can see this is under construction. Luckily, I mean, these are all ply boarded up before we took the ply off, and then discovered all of these nice spindles underneath the balusters. It's just another shot of the roof rafters, and then just a shot of the bathroom, which again, trying to use what we have, as in steel enamel baths come with this natural gradient where they've sprayed the enamel on in the factory, and we wanted to, so instead of putting the bath panel in, we wanted to keep that as a feature, so we put in this little steel frame instead of a bath panel. And then just some more photographs of it in use, and you can see in this photo the aluminium, foamed aluminium. And that's a wrap.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. That's fantastic. Oh, hello. That was fantastic, Matt. Really great project. And again, that whole idea about, you know, bringing personality, like when it's your own project, it just becomes something it becomes a kind of an act of experimentation and interrogation, which is something you, as you say, you can so rarely do with a client because they've got, you know, views and particular needs. So, I mean, beautifully done. I mean, you know, so many questions actually coming in. The first one, I mean, people saying, well, Bob Prewett saying he loved the surgical intervention and exploitation of the existing. The skinny columns are great. They really dance out into the garden. Amelia was asking where your aluminium bubbled external cladding came from.
I must confess.
And Brian said, could the roof have read heavier if the soffit of the kitchen area continued in the same cladding material as you ran on the outside?
Yeah, the aluminium. It could have, and that was one of the original ideas, but to be honest, the aluminium was very expensive. So, and it came all the way from Canada. It was shipped from Canada. It was with probably the most extravagant piece. Yeah, it could have run underneath, but I think what I quite like is this kind of like billboard architecture in a way. And if you noticed in the house, a lot of the surfaces, no surfaces that connect are only in some cases are they the same. So each surface is treated as a different element for as a different potential material or color. So that then again runs through to the billboard mounting.
And I mean, Zara and Matt said they love this project, the narrative and the design journey, such joyous, thoughtful whimsy. Absolutely, I'd agree with that one. I've got Irene Casajuana asking a question about the party wall. Is it a missed opportunity for increasing the acoustic insulation, or is there any alternative solution there?
Yeah, I mean, we could have improved the acoustic performance of the party wall, but we decided not to because the functions of the kitchen and the dining room sort of run in parallel, and that we're really sort of tight on that width. So we try to avoid any extra internal width in that case. And also, you know, we could have improved the acoustic performance, but actually we were living in there for 3 months before, and we didn't have any issues either way. So unless our neighbour's not telling us that we're too noisy, then we think it's all right.
Chris and James from Lloyd & Co are saying fantastic, very rich, deeply personal project, great detailing. Matt says it's an amazing project. It's really inspirational. I love it. And Azia Grzybowska is saying fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Clearly giving a lot of kind of food for thought for all of our viewers, because it is a really quite an amazing, completely out there. I mean, I'd love to know what your next door neighbour actually thinks of the people looking back at you. I'm more interested, not less the next door neighbour, probably the people looking back at you from the opposite garden side, maybe.
Yeah, well, they're quite far away, luckily. And we've got a tree in the way, so I think part of the neighbours connected were because their house had been empty for 6 years. I think they were just glad that someone moved in, to be honest. And because although it is a mountain and it is made of shiny aluminium, because we lowered the floor level by about 1 meter, the actual mass of it is quite small compared to the neighbours' extensions. Yeah. So it shouts, but it's small and shouty.
Oh, well, thank you very much indeed, Matt. I mean, I hear Bob was saying it's on the House of the Year list as well. So you know, it's a couple of really great. I mean, all of them fantastic projects and being kind of accoladed in their own unique ways. So best of luck with it all. Yeah, thanks very much. I'd like to thank everybody. I mean, I know we've overrun completely, so I'd like to thank all our viewers for their patience. It's been a fascinating presentation of these buildings, and I'd like to thank everybody who made their presentations. That would be Julian Owen of Julian Owen Associates, talking about custom and self-build. Bob Prewett, director at Prewett Bizley Architects, for that wonderful house in West London, which kind of, you know, indulgent as it is, probably a multi-million-pound house, but actually to make it super efficient and low carbon, which I thought was a really lovely idea to carry through. Loyne & Company, doing that robust but thoughtful intervention in an amazing landscape. And Can Architects, yeah, suburban reinvention, really. Shock of the new, imaginative uses of recycling, all on a deeply personal and experimental project. I really enjoyed it. So I apologize for running over 50 minutes, but I hope everybody's enjoyed these presentations, and I apologize in advance for our slight technical ones with Bob. We finally got him back. And I look forward to having another PiP seminar, hopefully early in the new year. Thank you very much indeed for all your support and for all your presentations that you've done over the year. I think it's made for a really good series, and I hope you've enjoyed watching them as much as I do presenting them. And all I can do is wish you a very happy end of the year, happy Christmas, and we'll see you at some point in the new year at the next PiP webinar. Thank you very much indeed.